Hello chess buddies, welcome to Amateur Chess University. Today, we will be looking at analysis of the round 4 game in the Fide Chess Grand Prix from Pool C. Now this game was played between Daniil Dubov, the Russian Grandmaster, and Vincent Keymer, the German Grandmaster. This game was short with only 32 moves, but features some beautiful ideas, especially from Dubov. So without further ado, let's head straight into the game. Dubov here with the white pieces and he begins with e4, going for the king's pawn opening. Vincent replied with c6, going for the Caracon defense. d4 by Dubov and d5 by Vincent. Here Dubov declines the exchange variation. He pushed his e4 pawn to e5, going for the advanced variation of the Caracon defense. Here Vincent developed his light square bishop to f5 and Dubov developed his kingside knight to f3, going for the advanced short variation of the Caracon defense. Now Vincent moved his pawn from e7 to e6. Here Dubov developed his light square bishop to e2 and Vincent pushed his c6 pawn to c5, trying to break white's central pawn chain. Best idea for white in this position is to go for castling, but Dubov preferred to develop his dark square bishop. He played bishop to e3, adding another defender to this d4 pawn. The usual idea for black in this position is to develop either of the knights. However, Vincent here played his queen to b6, targeting the b2 pawn. And Dubov didn't worry about this pawn. He continued developing his pieces. He played his knight to c3. Now Vincent developed his queenside knight to c6. And Dubov finally castles in this position. Now Vincent captured the b2 pawn with his queen, targeting the knight at c3. And Dubov countered this by playing his queen to e1, providing support to his knight at c3. c5 pawn captures a pawn on d4. And dark square bishop captures a pawn on d4. Then the knight at c6 captures the bishop on d4 and knight captures a knight on d4. Here Vincent brought his dark square bishop to b4, launching a double attack on the knight at c3. And Dubov moved his knight from d4 to b5, connecting both the knights. If you are wondering whether the light square bishop can capture the pawn on c2, it will not be a good idea because if light square bishop captures the pawn on c2, then white will play queen to d2. The bishop at c2 will be pinned. And even if black goes on a series of exchanges, like capturing the knight c3 with the dark square bishop, the knight will capture the bishop at c3. And if black plays rook to c8, then white will play knight to a4, because both the queen as well as the light square bishop will be under a lot of trouble. So after knight to b5 by Dubov, Vincent moved his dark square bishop back to a5, still targeting. And now Dubov moved his rook from a1 to b1, targeting the queen at b2. Now the black queen is restricted for space, so it went with the only available option, that is capturing the pawn at c2. And here Dubov played his rook to c1. Now Vincent moved his queen back to b2. And now Dubov moved his knight from c3 to a4, targeting the black queen while also exposing his own queen. With no option except the queen elimination on side, Vincent captured the white queen with his dark square bishop. And Dubov captured the black queen with his knight at a4. Now Vincent moved his dark square bishop back to a5. And Dubov moved his knight from b5 to d6, delivering a check while also targeting the helpless b7 pawn. Here Vincent moved his king to e7. And Dubov captured the pawn at b7 with his knight, now targeting the dark square bishop at a5. Here Vincent moved his dark square bishop to d8. And Dubov captured the dark square bishop at d8 with his knight. And king captured the knight at d8. Now Dubov brought his rook from f1 to d1, targeting the d file where the king is present. Now there are two games in the database in same position where black moved his knight to either e7 or h6, and both the games ended in a draw. However, Vincent here put his rook to b8, and it is as of move 20 that we have a completely new game. Now the rook at b8 is attacking the knight at b2. So Daniil moved his knight to c4. And now Vincent pushed his g7 pawn to g5. Here Daniil played his knight to d6, targeting this f7 pawn. And Vincent brought his light square bishop back to g6. Here Dubov played his rook from d1 to d4, preparing to bring the rook to a4. Now the problem for Vincent is his rook is completely blocked by his own knight at g8. So he decided to free up the knight. He brought his knight to e7. Now Dubov played his pawn from g2 to g4, Here Vincent played his rook from b8 to b6, preparing to bring his rook to c6. His idea is to go for a rook exchange by eliminating this rook at c1, while also simultaneously trying to bring his knight to c6. However, Dubov didn't allow this. He played his light square bishop to b5. The best idea for black in this position was to play pawn to a6, targeting the bishop, or to develop this rook at h8. However, Vincent continued to be passive. He played his rook back to b8, and now Dubov moved his rook to a4, targeting the a7 pawn. And here, Vincent played his knight to c8. However, this was an error to regret. So feel free to pause the video and try to figure out a move Dubov played to gain complete advantage for white. If you're able to do it, well done. The move played by Dubov in this position was an obvious rook captured the knight at c8, delivering a check. Now black rook captures the rook at c8 and rook captures the pawn at a7. The importance of the rook capturing the knight is very well seen now, because Dubov is preparing to checkmate the black king in the next move by playing the rook to d7. And Vincent here has no other option but to bring his rook to c7, blocking that check. However, this leaves the 8th rank undefended, and now Dubov played his rook to a8, delivering a check. With the rook at h8, surely lost. Vincent was forced to move his king to e7, and now Dubov captured the rook at h8 with his rook at a8, and it is right at an advantage with the rook, light square bishop, and a knight aggressively attacking the black king. Now Vincent pushed his f7 pawn to f6, trying to capture this pawn at e5 and leave this knight at d6 undefended. However, Dubov was equally up to the task. He played his rook to c8, looking for a rook exchange that comes with a check by the knight. Vincent didn't capture the rook at c8. He moved his rook to a7, targeting the pawn at a2, and Dubov moved his rook to c6. And it was in this position on move 32 that Vincent resigned the game. So let's see why. Dubov's idea next is to play his knight to c8. However, he was also prepared for the rook at a7, capturing the pawn at a2. Then he will play his rook to c7, delivering a check. And the king cannot move to d8 because it will get checkmated. And if the king moves to f8, then the e5 pawn will capture the pawn on f6. And white will coast to a comprehensive victory. So that's the reason why, after rook to c6, Vincent resigned the game. So that's the game. Dubov once again showing why he is such an entertaining player to watch, churning out beautiful yet effective game-turning sequence of moves to obtain a victory. If you have any thoughts on the game, feel free to share below. Thank you for watching. Take care. See you.